Welcome to the Angels Positivity and Love Show. Incredible guests the world over, amazing insights, and a super high vibe to share with all of us. We've been at it 3.25 years. That's 367 shows booked into December of 2026. We've got one of our original guests. He was episode 4 and episode 145, and he's coming back. This is episode 322, and he's out of Seattle. Marc Lainhart. He's got a lot of hats that he wears. He's author, show host, totally intuitive. He calls it intuitive prospecting. He basically helps you dust off your tools, tap your heart, and get going, mining the universe, mining within, essentially expanding your consciousness and taking advantage of what's already in and around you so you can experience more love and more fun in life. And he's a super jolly fellow, ex-Coast Guard veteran, was on the Coast Guard's Cutter Spencer off of Puerto Rico and has shared many great stories, experiences, whether it's seeing an angel in a waterfall or aboard that Coast Guard Cutter Spencer, seeing a UFO with the rest of the crew come out of the water on an evening while they're cruising back to the United States. Marc, great to see you again.
Great to see you, brother. Thanks for having me back on. How you been?
How's life in the midst of all this complexity worldwide? Are you worried at all, or do you feel like this is part of a bigger universal plan? Angels have something in mind, and so do many other loving figures.
Yeah, actually, quite the opposite. I'm actually quite I'm a glass half full kind of guy, and a lot of the I'd said years ago that our Roaring Twenties, this decade that we're in, would be a decade that history would reflect back on and know it as great transformation, great chaos, great ascension. And I think we're into the timeline now. That timeline that I talked about in 2017, 2018 is caught up now to what I was seeing. And I talked about the great coming together. And I believe that we're moving towards this journey of higher consciousness. And that's why there's so much chaos going on in the world right now, because things are breaking down. Institutions, people, politics, global events, they're all breaking down because in order to renew, like Phoenix Rising, you've got to break down old ways of thinking, old ways of being, old ways of doing. And right now, I think humanity stands at a crossroads. I think where we're at technologically advanced, um, the quest for deeper understanding of who we are as a species, this is carving out this new age of consciousness, or what I say the great coming together. Now, when I saw this download years ago, I didn't know what that would look like. But I also talked about you talked about my Coast Guard days and some of the soul adventures I've had in a previous life that really kind of gave me the experiences to talk about. And I said in our Roaring Twenties, and you go back to my podcast and my articles, that I said that we would learn that we're not alone officially during this decade, that we're not alone in this universe. And you're seeing that in real time at the highest levels through social media, through the news outlet. Even I'm surprised on the government because I thought it would come through crowdsourcing, but I think that's going to be a pivotal moment to realize, yeah, we're not alone. We haven't been alone for a long time. This is one of the oldest conspiracy theories known to mankind is, are we alone? And I think that we're awakening this self-awareness to be like, yeah, we're not alone. And that's going to open up a lot more higher thinking, and it's going to change the way that we live our lives here on the planet. So I'm actually quite enthusiastic about what lies ahead, even though it doesn't seem like that now. I was more dreadful years ago what I saw coming, including COVID. But now that we're past that, I see actually just great vibration and energy for a majority of the population. There's always going to be that 70-30 split, right? History teaches us that 70% want to progress forward in their way of being, and there's always going to be that 30% that wants to stay in the status quo, stay in their lane, not make any waves or changes, and that's fine. But I see this as a great period in our time of evolution, transformation, and ascension for where we're going, based on consciousness, based on understanding that we're not alone, and we've got everything from robots now to AI to extra dimensional beings that has been, disclosure is happening. We've got Spielberg's movie coming out next month where he's as quoted as saying it's more truth than fiction, Disclosure Day. You've got a couple documentaries out there on Netflix and Prime talking about, disclosure, the day of disclosure. And I think it's going to be scary for some, but for most of us that work in the quantum or the higher fields of consciousness, it's quite exciting because it's going to open up new doors of opportunity from medicine to travel to physics to philosophy to spirituality. There might be a problem with religion because it doesn't fit in that context, and that's where there's going to be some big struggles for people. Is how does this fit religiously? When our planet has over 5,000 different religions, different gods. And it's going to be interesting to watch and unfold. But I always remind my clients, my students, my listeners, observe it, don't absorb it. Observing is a higher form of intelligence, and get out of your own way of your conscious bias, and really observe what's going on, and then make it, an informed, logical decision of your own of where that fits into your own lifestyle, into your own narrative. But Mike, I'm pretty excited, to be honest with you. I don't know where this excitement comes from, but I look at the world and I turn on the TV and it's like there's nothing really to be excited about. But it's that state of consciousness, and usually consciousness, it's usually preceded by great chaos in order for transformation to take place. And I believe that's where we're at. We're at that period of time in 2026, with only just a few years to go until we move into the next decade.
And I know you've touched on your prior appearances here, episode 4, episode 145, and there'll be links below the video. People can check you out. You've touched on those predictions before, and here they are. Okay, let's do this. Let's have you rewind. And even though you described in another appearance on this show, your Coast Guard experience on that cutter, you were on the engine room, you were down in the engine room, but had gotten off duty, but still wanted to swing by the bridge, maybe get a cup of coffee or something. There's plenty of people on duty, radar, the rest. Can you go through some of that flavor and give us that experience? I know it was a while ago, but it's a good story.
Well, yeah, in a former life, when I served, I was in the Coast Guard for almost 10 years, and had left the Coast Guard, had done many amazing missions in the Coast Guard, would do it over again if I had a chance. But this one particular would have been in 1999 off the coast of Puerto Rico, also known as the tip of the Bermuda Triangle. And for those of us that follow ufology or have had an experience with something beyond our normal way of thinking, that's a big hotspot for what's called USOs, underwater submerged objects, that people have been talking about for, even when I was in the Coast Guard in 99, people were talking about this area as a very known hotspot for USOs, UFOs, and now today that's called UAP, which is funny because you changed the name. The government changed it again. So it used to be unidentified aerial phenomenon. They've now since changed it because it doesn't just include ships that are out in the sky. They're going into the ocean as well. So now they're calling it unidentified anomalous phenomenon. That's the new UAP. And I tell people, follow the money, follow the budgets, follow the congressional oversight, follow the whistleblowers. You've got people from Stanford and Harvard professors to Top Gun pilots to admirals to generals to high-ranking officials in the government, all saying the same thing. And so, this point was in 99, so there would be no technology of drone technology at the time. But when you're underway out in the middle of the big blue with no lights, because we're running darkened ship, our mission is to actually find drugs and go fast boats to stop the drugs coming in the United States. And it was during this time, about 3:30 in the morning, we get off watch, we change watch, and we'll go up. Not all crews do this, but we would go up and sit and swap, what's going on with the engine room, what's going on the bridge. And we had detected these orbs of light off our starboard bow. And when we turned into it, it kept its distance. And then finally we stopped, and it stopped, and it put on a show for us of all these dancing balls of light. But the interesting thing about it, Michael, is they made no noise. So they defined the ways, and they weren't floating because we're out in the middle of nowhere. So these aren't like a balloon, they're not, but your mind is trying to rationalize what you're seeing and try to, debunk logically. Could it be a weather phenomenon? Could it be the stars giving off, these false positives? When you're underway, that can happen. But we're out in the middle of nowhere, hundreds of miles from any shore, and we're watching these orbs that very similar to what you see in Close Encounters of the Third Kind back in '77, one of Spielberg's first movies. And I'm witnessing this, and the intelligence, there was no fear-based, but they would move, and they would move without sound. They would zip, and they'd be here, and then they'd be here, and then they'd be here, and they'd be here, but you wouldn't actually see it travel from point A to point B. It would just be like they would hear, just kind of like stars flickering. So that's why you're like, is this a star anomaly? Is there something reflecting that we're not, is our eyes playing tricks on us? But they all had different colors. And the cool thing about it is there was an intelligence there. You could feel the intelligence. I knew they knew we were watching them. I say they because I can't logically justify what I was witnessing was unidentified. But it was intelligent and it wasn't threatening. And that's what I tell people. My experience was non-threatening. It wasn't fear-based. It was quite magical. And all of a sudden, everything just moved into one big ball of light, kind of morphed a cobalt blue color, went down in the ocean. The whole ocean lit up blue, and then it was completely dark again. And next day, nobody really talked about it. It was recorded in the log. We weren't told not to talk about it. It wasn't like a national security issue. We witnessed something. And I've since then had more experiences with that. But I tell people that as an experiencer, that's where I became a full believer of something beyond ourselves, that we're not alone on this planet. And this planet is very big. We're 70% water, and we haven't even discovered 15% of our own oceans, let alone what's deep down in the earth. We know more about our moon right now than we do our own oceans. So it's funny how these stories are now coming out. I call it the drip, drip, drip that I started talking about and writing about and podcasting about back in 2017, this drip, drip, drip like a faucet. Well, that faucet's gotten turned on a lot stronger, and it's not a drip drip. It's a steady stream of information and disclosure that's coming out. And I always tell my students, wait, watch, and witness, because there's a lot of I told you so, and we're witnessing, not from a standpoint of ego or vanity, but what I was seeing during our roaring 20s is going to also play into that higher state of consciousness of moving beyond ourselves to realize that we're not alone in this universe, and that this planet is quite capable of harnessing intelligence beyond human capabilities. And I think that's quite fascinating, because that changes everything. That is one of the biggest questions ever asked of mankind. And I think that changes how we live our lives moving forward. And the generations behind us will accept it for what it is. It's pretty cool. About 75% now, 80%, the last poll. Most people in that percentile believe that we're not alone. And Carl Sagan would say it's a big waste of space if that's the case. If we're the only species in this planet and this universe, it's a big waste of space. And I think the time is coming that we're finally going to disclose that we're not alone, and we're not the only intelligent species. This species or species is far superior and intelligent. And then people fear the concept of aliens, Michael, because they worry they're going to treat us how we treat animals here on this planet and how we treat others on this planet. And I say, don't buy into that BS, because if they're intelligent, they've worked through their technology, they've worked through their ego, they've worked through their transgressions as a species. And if they wanted to end us, they would have done it years ago before we became nuclear or atomic. And that's when the interest really started playing up right after World War II, the race for the bomb. But here's the thing: most people accept that we're not alone and that there are other species. Right now, it's a battle for technology, because I think some of the stuff that we're seeing out there has been reverse engineered from the 40s. And what we're seeing is actually the military industrial complex testing out new technology and ships. And it's a race for superiority on this technology against us, China, Russia, who gets it first, just like who got the bomb first. There was a race to get the atom bomb between us and Germany to end World War II. Same thing. Once we became nuclear, the extra dimensional beings have a very keen interest. And there's a lot of stories through disclosure now that's coming out, from Gemini to Apollo to Voyager, that's being released over the course of the last 84 years. And then just the timing of it. Spielberg's movie's coming out next month, Disclosure Day. And I don't know if you've seen the trailer, but I'm like, come on. I mean,
that's a little fear-based, a little.
It is a little fear-based. But again, what I challenge people is what we don't understand as humans leads us to that fear-based energy. And I'd say, don't buy into that fear-based. Observe and then make a logical decision, but receive the information without having it be fear-based, because we just don't understand it, right? The cool thing about physics is physics keeps that door open and cracked to what we don't know, what we think we know, but what we don't know. So there's going to be a lot of stories, a lot of false narratives, a lot of, content generated around this concept. I would say observe it, take everything with a grain of salt, especially if it's social media and the news outlet and the government. But it's just interesting. The government now has a domain name, governmentaliens.gov. I mean, come on, you don't get a domain name just to put it out there. I even put up my little Grogu for you, because Mandalorian and Grogu comes out in 2 days. And so I'm going to be going to that. But if we just take a logical approach to this, extraordinary becomes ordinary. Paranormal becomes normal. Science fiction becomes science reality and science fact. Gene Roddenberry, who wrote Star Trek years ago, talked about this all the time. Carl Sagan talked about it. Hawkins talked about it. Einstein talked about it. Multidimensional construct. And just look at all of our movies and our entertainment. They all talk about portals, the multiverse, the multi-universe, right? And I just think that we're slipping into that timeline of really manifesting into our own reality. And I think it's quite exciting. I think recognition of other beings can be scary for some, but again, that fear comes based on how we treat other animals and how we treat each other on this planet. If they wanted to treat us bad, they could have done it years ago. They have that, their technology is far superior, far more advanced. If they wanted to, could have been just like that. That tells me that, in my opinion, leads me to believe that they're not hostile, that they're ready to open up and lead us if we're willing to accept that. I mean, you had former President Obama say, I don't get into politics, but he actually said that he would love to be an ambassador if we do have first contact. He would like to be the spokesperson for that interaction. I mean, this is a former president talking about that. So there's a lot of moving parts that seem to be syncing up based on what I was seeing years ago during the roaring 20s of transformation, that we're not alone.
Okay, now philosophical question. You've got Star Trek with Shatner and
Yeah.
Leonard Nimoy and stuff from the 60s. Would the unconditional love figures be on the Enterprise and the humans were always on the planet and it was no interference that way? Or were the humans on the ship? What's your take on the 60s and that Star Trek episode? Do you think it's actually the unconditional love figures? I'm going to refer to the animated 1970s version where they still had Shatner doing a voiceover, Leonard Nimoy. And if anybody remembers, it was the slow animation stuff, like Justice League of America, Justice Hall of America, whatever that was called, with the Wonder
Right.
Twins. But there was a Kaitian communicating a lieutenant officer who was on the bridge and they really tried. And there was a skinny kind of lava-looking guy who was an alien as well, right in the front where Chekhov would sit. But they threw in a lot more aliens in the animated version as part of the crew. So, what's your take on who were the humans? Were the humans really the ones down on the planet that we were always trying to help on the bridge of the Enterprise? What's
Ooh,
your
yeah.
take on this? It's a real 50-50 thing.
Well, you're right. So Star Trek started back in 1966, right? The TV series. And to answer your question, I don't know that, is it a perspective of the extra dimensional beings coming down to help us and we're catching up to that timeline? Um, but something that I find interesting is when the movie came out, because the movie after the Star Trek series came out, it only aired on TV for a few seasons, then it ended. And then the movie came out, I want to say 1978 timeline. Don't quote me on that. But I just was rewatching that. It was on, and it's interesting because the whole concept is this intelligence that returns to Earth 350 years later to find its maker, and who are the carbon units and where are the carbon units. And then they take one of the lieutenants and make her a combination of carbon unit and AI. And then she wants to know the source code, and the source code comes from Voyager, which in the movie they call it V'ger, because the name was rusted over. And so when Shatner gets to the source and wipes it down, it's actually Voyager 1 that we sent out 350 years ago. That's genius to think. If you think where we're going, how do we know that there's not going to be a source that returns back to the home planet? And of course, Shatner says to Uhura, like, hey, give me the source code, which would be analog and completely trying to get a code from 350 years ago to communicate to the V'ger that's ready to destroy the planet. I just found that to be like genius writing back in 1978. And we're now talking about that as a possibility for moving forward as a species with to the stars. We're pioneers. We're engineers. We're explorers. That is part of our who we are. We've always been looking up and asking, what if? And I believe that's happening. And I think Star Trek is science fiction moving into reality to become more science reality and science fact. And again, what we don't understand now, don't let it go to fear. Don't get caught up in the media or what pundits and governments are saying. Observe for yourself and then feel into it. And trust your intuition on this. This is what I've been teaching my students, because some are very upset, or not upset, but concerned about what's going on with AI, what's going on with disclosure. And I'm like, it just seems to be all coming to a point that how do we know that AI is not going to be a tool used to language to communicate? They just did a documentary on dolphins using AI, and they've now had a 20-minute conversations back and forth between humans and dolphins, and understanding through AI how dolphins communicate based on their tones and calling each other by name. Fascinating things that are going to be, kind of mind blowing. Like, wow, we're talking to dolphins now. We're understanding that their language is actually quite far superior, but we don't understand it, right? We think we're superior. I don't think that we are. If you take whales and dolphins and octopus, they have communications and logic and reasoning and empathy, just like other mammals. Not the octopus being a mammal, but being, logical and problem solving. I think that AI is going to be. Here's something for your audience. We've talked about this in philosophy and the what if world. How do we know that AI, which was first proposed in the 1950s as the theory and as a hypothesis, that AI would now come into our reality today, and it's happening. There's lots of money being channeled in the private sector and the military industrial complex. But we needed to reach certain points of consciousness and engineering aspects for us to even understand AI being accessible. For example, the Industrial Revolution, taking and the process of alchemy to turn different things into different materials. Turn of the century, electricity. Then we get into computers, silicone, processing, internet, Wi-Fi. All these tools have been building up to where we can now access AI. But what if AI has always been there? We just haven't had the tools to understand it or access it until now. I don't
And I
know
like
the
to
answer,
point out
but
that
it's interesting.
there's universal AI. There's unlimited answers available to anybody, all languages with some humor. If you just want to listen to the universe, it takes a lot of going still or going here. And that's the next question. And it's really going to be more on the spiritual front for all of us. How do we
Okay.
spend more time here, a little less thinking or devices externally? Here's a quote from Gary Zukav, Seed of the Soul. I probably have read this quote to you before, but it's probably one of my top 5 quotes on this show. You change the way that you shape the light which is flowing through you by changing your consciousness. So, if you could talk to us about how you interpret that.
Yeah, I would actually, I would go back to Dr. Wayne Dyer when I started my spiritual practice over 20 years ago. One of the first, very similar to what you just said, and Dr. Wayne Dyer would always say, if you change the way that you look at things, the things that you would look at start to change. And I didn't understand that. And when my spiritual abilities and my practice started open and I started to explore to discover that diamond within as the intuitive prospector, but also to now start discovering all the hidden gems that are around us, the one thing I learned is just because we don't see it does not mean it's not here and around us. And there's many examples: gravity, wind, air, the Wi-Fi signal that's connecting you and I. We don't see it here, but we're aware of it through our knowledge. But we can see the effects. Like if we don't have air, guess what? I need air. I need to breathe. Right? Something's wrong. Planet's not producing air, or the wind is blowing the tree. I don't see the wind blowing the tree. I see the effects of the wind on the tree. Right? So there's a lot of things that I learned over my course of time that just because we don't see it, and what's taken me down the rabbit hole even deeper, because remember Alice in Wonderland, she asked, I think it was the caterpillar smoking the hookah, how far does this hole go? And he said, how far do you want it to go? Because it's all based on free will and choice of what we want to discover and explore. And in working with plant medicines, which are very ancient, very culturally based, working with extensively over the last 3 years with all of my surgeries and healing and transformation and weight loss, plant medicines has now taken me to an even broader perspective and a deeper connection to grandmother, to Gaia, to Mother Earth, to the angels, to the extra dimensional beings, to the matrix. And all of that is when you change the way you look at something, the things that you look at start to change because your focus determines your reality. And when we're talking about this, some people are like, those two guys are crazy. No, we've just had a lot of experiences and a lot of insight and a lot of mentorship and education to understand that we're moving towards knowledge and hopefully enlightenment. But then other people catch up. And I've had so many people reach out to me, Mike, over the last year about disclosure saying, you were talking about this. You were right. Again, not an ego or vanity standpoint, it's just what we're seeing, but the timeline doesn't match up because we're the only species that measures a construct of time based on this and how many times we've gone around the sun, right? So what we see is what I see coming is not always going to be right on time, real time. It could take a month, it could take a year, it could take 4 years. In this case, it's taken about 7 to 8 years to unfold to be like, we're literally talking about disclosure at the highest levels, all the way up to the presidency, saying we're not alone and that there's a species been around here for a long time. How does society accept that? How does the religious leaders accept that? And I think it's just an understanding of consciousness of evolution based on who we are. And that's changing the way you look at something. Like if you and I talking like this 25, 30 years ago, people would have said, that's straight out of Star Trek.
Oh.
That's science fiction. Mike and Mark are talking via this thing called the internet. What's the internet? And oh, just Google it. Well, what's Google? 35 years ago, Google, is that French for something? Is that, oh, well, go to the internet. Well, where is the internet? Well, the internet's in our computer. So these are concepts that we're starting to accept and realize where, even just 50 years ago, we wouldn't have had a basic understanding of consciousness. And that's why I believe disclosure is unfolding and then changing the way that we're looking at this, not from a fear-based, because there's going to be a lot of fear generated around this. I would say observe it, don't absorb it, and make your own insightful, logical decision on what feels right for you. And challenge status quo, challenge your own thoughts, right? Just because somebody says it doesn't make it so. And that's changing the way you look at things, because then the things you look at start to change. So that's what I'd say, going all the way back to Dr. Wayne Dyer 20 plus years ago. He's now in the spirit world, but
Well, we might be bringing Wayne Dyer in a little bit. I wrote his name down plus Jaguar spirits. We'll see if we get to play a little bit in a little bit. But
Yeah.
Speaking of challenging, I'm going to have you put your Sherlock Holmes spiritual consciousness universal perspective hat on, and I'm going
Oh
to give
no,
you.
that's
I'm
funny you
going
say that because I have one.
to.
This is my tinfoil hat, and it's gotten much more fashionable over the years.
It's a
But I
fancy one, that's for sure.
huh? Huh?
I like it. It's very beautiful. I've got three data points for you, and I'd like you to talk about it's, some people would call it manifesting. Others will talk about what you said, the 70-30% crowd thing. Some
Yeah.
people will be very linear and stuck to time and stuck to good or bad or stuck to thinking,
Yeah.
adhering to it, unable to expand. So here are three data points for you, and I'm going to have to talk for just like a minute here. But the first is the movie Celestine Prophecy, and I'm going to do a plug. In June of 2026, Barnett Baines' show is coming out. He's a Hollywood film director. He did Mia Kushner, Donald Sutherland, Eckhart Tolle's movie. Now I'm forgetting it. It was a bullying film, totally blanked on the name, but he also worked on What Dreams May Come and Celestine Prophecy. In that Celestine Prophecy movie, Redfield, you don't have to see it. You've got a NCIS or JAG actress. You've got Edward James Olmos in it. You've got the guy from Band of Brothers, Lieutenant First, the badass. Um, he's being, let me do it this way. There's a scene where they're in the jungle. Soldiers are looking for them. There's a little bit of a revolution going on. They're being hunted. And they raise their vibes so much that they disappear as the soldiers are just coming right by them and they miss them. So there's a split in the timeline. Now, somebody, a reader, when I mentioned this on a different show, mentioned that one of them wavered and showed some fear and came back down to earth essentially, and then they got caught. But let's stick to the first part. They went invisible, the soldiers go by, and there was a shift in the timeline, two different dimensions in the same space. Now, the second example would be Elizabeth April. She's on Instagram, remote viewer, intuitive, Canadian. She's just sharing being with her child, maybe a 6-year-old, doing a counting exercise with marbles, and there's another adult in the room. So she puts the marble in the child's hand. The child says one, two marbles, two, three marbles, three, four marbles, four. The adults see the fifth marble go in. Child says four, repeats four, and there's four marbles split in time. Now I'm going to give the third, Cynthia Sue Larson, who's coming back for her third appearance. The Mandela effect. She has a couple right in. They have to do an ER trip. They're a happy couple. They're at home. Something happens. The paramedics arrive. Maybe they stop the blood, but he's got to get stitches. I don't know. They know this ER is 24/7 packed, stall after stall after stall. It's busy. The two paramedics are great. They get to the place, two nurses. They don't see anybody. Empty stall, empty stall, empty stall. 4 hours goes by. The nurses say the place is packed. They get in, get out over the 4 hours. Great experience, but another one of those splits. Now we got the Sherlock Holmes of all time. You've done a lot of interviews of a lot of guests on your show, Om Times Media. You've got Inspired Living Radio. You've seen a lot, done a lot. You stay open enough to not know a lot. We need you to know something now between everything you've already talked about, the 70-30 split.
Yeah.
What just happened? What's the theme through all these? Even bring in Star Trek if you want.
Ooh. I think that we're moving. See, how can I answer this? Because I know the movie you're talking about because it came out in 2006 and it didn't do well in the movie theaters. The book was excellent, but it didn't the adaptation of the movie because I think a lot of people didn't understand it, right? They didn't understand what they were watching versus what they're reading. And I believe what we're witnessing is a shift in dimensional construct. And that dimensional construct, there's many different dimensional constructs. And we always, again, does art imitate life or does life imitate art? I don't know, right? But when I saw that movie, I got where it was going, right? And timelines, it's kind of like Einstein's, spooky energy at a distance. When you have one atom, regardless of distance, is triggered, the other atom is also triggered at the exact same time. And so when we start thinking of interdimensional construct, what I believe is what we're witnessing in that higher state of consciousness, not just disclosure and that we're alone in the universe, no longer alone in the universe, but also the dimensional construct of how we understand space and time. Einstein was really good about talking about time and that time is not linear and it can change based on gravity, based on black holes. I think Interstellar is a fabulous movie to watch because it really does give an insight of what can happen and the consequences of time based on travel. But to answer your question specifically on the Celestine prophecies, what's the other movie you'd mentioned?
There was the Elizabeth April. Oh, I did mention Star Trek a little bit, but there was the Elizabeth April counting marbles example. The adults are in the 5 marble reality. The kid is like, I don't
Right.
want to go that far. 4 is what I want to do.
Oh, four.
Yeah,
right?
and the ER room was the other one. So people have a lot more abilities than they realized, right? To shift their
Right.
consciousness, to shift their surroundings.
Expand your consciousness, right? That's why Einstein always talked about that this 3.5 pound object in our head called our brain, through neuroplasticity, through plant medicine, through meditation, through breath work, it is one of the most complex organisms in the universe. And that's Einstein saying that back years ago. And now we're understanding from neurobiology, nanotechnology, quantum consciousness, quantum mechanics, quantum computing, quantum physics. We're moving into an understanding of moving past a three-dimensional construct. And that's why things seem to be failing here, because we're moving into a fourth dimensional and a fifth dimensional construct, to give a visual to help people understand, because it's hard to understand. It's hard to get your brain around it. It took me years of, like you said, I've been doing Inspired Living, the syndicated podcast, for 11 seasons now, and I've talked to a lot of different amazing guests and experts. And one of the things I have here is from a gem show that I got years ago. And this would be equivalent to the Tesseract in Interstellar. It's multi-dimensional constructs. And right now we find ourselves in a three-dimensional construct, but around us, there's a lot going on. Like Everything Everywhere All the Time is a good example of the movie of moving parts in different timelines. And you can even equate the Matrix to when the little kid is bending the spoon and he tells Neo, you can't, it's physically impossible to bend the spoon. You just have to realize there is no spoon. And so when people start to have that awareness and that consciousness, and this ties into the evolution of consciousness and the ascension of consciousness that I've been talking about, we're moving into a fourth dimensional and a fifth dimensional construct, which I think is going to be exciting, but it's also going to be hard for the general population, that 30 percentile that I talk about historically. It's going to be hard for them to accept it without some sort of religious fear, dogma, indoctrination, making it something that it's not. And again, we just don't, I think of it like the telephone. We talked earlier before the show about the telephone that you actually had to ring up, take the thing off. Now look at the technology. First, it was, we moved to the landlines, exactly. And then we got to the smartphones, the little flip phones with the antenna. And now we have this little black obelisk that, Stanley Kubrick talked about in 2001: A Space Odyssey, the black monolith that just appears that brings forth intelligence. Kind of interesting that we're at this point of evolution, but we're moving into expansion of our understanding in the timeline. And I think that's where AI and disclosure is also going to paint that picture, that portal, that just what we think we understand today is going to be subject to change. And that's what science teaches us. Science is only truthful as it is right now. It is always subject to change. And that is multidimensional, moving from three-dimensional into fourth dimensional, fifth dimensional construct.
Are you ready to do a lightning round? It could
Yep.
include sage, seeing auras, talking to a few angels. We'll see where this goes because I think it can tie right back into everything you've been talking about. But we've done sage before. If you haven't watched the show a lot, doesn't matter where you are, what year it is. You can be in Bonn, Germany, or Berlin, Tokyo, Christchurch, New Zealand. You just catch the sage through two screens, but it's really what he said about Einstein, the two particles being connected. Okay, I'm going to light some sage. Mark, are you ready for a little smoke? You may already be getting it, but
Yeah, let's do it.
if people want to not go linear, they're going to get sage or a campfire smell. That's fine. You don't have to taste it if you're hyper intuitive. But ask for flowers, ask for ocean, and just trust that your angels, your loved ones, even your past over pets are rooting you on, cheering you on. You just have to be in your heart. No triota. Okay. And I did Yoda's voice before the show. Maybe I'll do it later. Okay, Mark, I'm blowing a little sage your way. Are you already getting the smoke there in Seattle?
I am. Bring
Okay,
it through.
ask for flowers and maybe we can have it galactic flowers. It'll smell like hibiscus, but even more than a hibiscus. Who knows? I'm gonna snub this out. What are you getting that's extra? It could be sparkles all over your eyelids. Whether your eyes are open or closed, you can see light around you. We have balls of light flying by the show all the
Three
time.
eyes. I always say we have three eyes in life: two to look, one to see. Tell people to start opening this eye, including your sensations. It's funny you say hibiscus, because my hibiscuses are coming into bloom around my hot tub, and so I'll pick that from some tea to connect with nature. As far as flowers, it's almost like I keep getting the sunflower for me, because the sunflower is such an intelligence flower, because when it lacks sun, it leans towards other sunflowers to just share its radiant energy. And so sunflowers are very, if you ever watch sunflowers, I have them in my garden, when the sun is not out, they actually will turn towards one another. And when the sun is out, they'll actually turn and face toward the sun, almost to like rejuvenate. And I think that's what we need to do as a species. We need to face each other versus divide and be apart from one another. And that's part of that great coming together that I've been talking about in forecasting and podcasting about, is we need to be sunflowers that turn towards one another and accept each other from our different perspectives and our different, beliefs and our different behaviors, but be accepting. But then also at the same time, when we're helping people, helping our fellow man and being in service and helping the planet, then we can turn to something bigger than ourselves, whether that's God, the sun, the spirit, whatever that is for that person. But just based on that intention, the sunflower really kind of just popped into my mind, along with my hibiscuses that are coming into bloom right now.
I'll have to get with you after the show. I've got a hibiscus, but I had forgotten that you can make tea. And
Yeah.
that was a shot that I took of my sunflower, a ginormous one, this morning. We have a big storm coming in. I've got 2 straps on it, hoping it doesn't blow over. But we've had a lot of rain, and that's my back fence with all the sage bushes, and a lantana is the little guy in there. So they're huge, biggest I've ever had in Texas in 14 years. Okay, we're going to do something else. It's going to be just seeing auras, seeing light. You get a dad joke, most importantly. If you're laughing, you're letting go. Let's quote Mother Teresa, laughter's love. And she's reconciled if anybody's worried about Mother Teresa. She's awesome. Unconditional love, great laugh. Okay, I'm going to use this as a background. Blue sky works great. I think you and I have done this plenty before, but I'll just do the thing out of Celestine Prophecy. But as Sue Frederick from Arizona said, hey, I was doing this in the 70s before the movie got made. We were already doing it this
We're
way.
doing
Yeah.
this before movies, yeah.
Yeah. In India, they do it this way. But it's going to be awkward. I'm going to be standing up. I'll do Yoda's voice to crack you up because I know you like Star Wars. This is the background. Here's the dad joke. Bert and Ernie, Sesame Street. Bert offers Ernie ice cream. What's Ernie say? Sure, Bert. Yep. And just be in your heart. If anybody needs extra help, breathe a little extra. Ask angels to get you out of your head. You're seeing with all of you. You're doing the Zen thing, seeing without seeing. You'll just see a little filament of light between my fingers. And then I'm going to go bigger and wider, Mark, after you say what you see. And I'll do Yoda's voice. Mm, do not. There is no try. Okay. And here's a little filament of light for you. What are you getting now?
I'm getting Michelangelo's rendition of Adam and God, where the fingers touch
Yep.
and God's fingers pointing down and Adam's fingers pointing up, but he's got a bend in his finger because it's almost like we're not worthy or we're not capable of connecting to something higher than ourselves. And so that's what I'm seeing on that. The backdrop is the actual, I think that's in the Sistine Chapel, isn't it? The
Yep.
Adam touching God. But that just tells me that we are capable of doing so much more. We limit ourselves based on, I don't know if it's based on fear, based on learned behaviors, based on cultural, indoctrination, but it's like we're not willing, our finger is bent, we're not willing to extend out to touch something bigger than ourselves. It's like almost like ET. If you go back to ET from 84, right? It was the finger that lit up and him touching, and he's like, I'll be right there. And he touches his third eye, right? That's interesting to me, right? I've always been convinced that Spielberg has had an insight track to all of this, going all the way back to Close
Encounters. Yeah.
But yeah, I see that, we're at a moment now, consciously, technology, energy, philosophy, acceptance. We couldn't have this conversation 150 years ago, right? We'd be tied up and being lit on fire, right? 150 years ago, having these kind of conversations. I think we're at that point where that finger starts to stretch and straighten out to where we are about to touch something bigger than ourselves. And again, there's going to be fear-based energy. Again, but fear for me is false evidence appearing real. Flip script and face everything and rise. Observe it, and we're about to touch something bigger than ourselves. That's going to be this explosion of consciousness through AI, through robotics, through technology, through medicine, through space travel and exploration, through interstellar travel. Think about this. If we're going to be on the verge of becoming a civilization 1 scale based off the Kardashev scale, which was Nikolai Kardashev back in 64, that he was an astronomer that proposed that when a species starts to harness its own energy, like a sphere, like a Dyson sphere, or be able to harness our energy of our planet, we reach a civilization 1 category. We're still probably about 100 years off from that, but everything going on from AI data centers being possibly moved to outer space because they're so big and need to be cooled, Japan building a space elevator up to space, we're starting to expand our consciousness and our technology outside of the planet. And that just tells me that we're moving towards a civilization 1, which then also would include interstellar capability. spending space and time to travel, because space is very big, right? And people forget we're technically on a spaceship right now. People forget that Earth is a spaceship traveling through the universe at 130,000 miles per hour. We just don't feel it, right? That's how fast the universe is expanding based on, think about 130,000 miles an hour going through space. We have to go over 17,000 miles an hour just to break our own atmosphere. If we're not going fast enough, we don't break atmosphere and we get bounced back. And the Artemis project that just was very successful was fascinating to watch. I think we're farther along than what they're letting on to allow us to see the Artemis project. But when you start thinking in terms of metaphysics and dimensional construct, we're moving at 130,000 miles an hour. We're leaving our planet at 17,000 miles an hour just to break atmosphere to go explore. That's where we're expanding out. This is what we're going to. That's that finger reaching out to touch whatever God is for you, that divinity of something bigger than ourselves that we just don't necessarily understand yet.
Can we have you do some listening to an angel named Charlotte? This will be pertaining back to your Coast Guard cutter days and the unconditional love beings, consciousness that you encountered. With your permission, you get to close your eyes. I'll just put her up for a second, though. Connect with her, get a nice couple of words before you really start, get a hug. But if you'll close your eyes, and people at home, you can breathe extra if you need to put a hand on your heart. You can ask angels to get you out of your head into your heart. Own it with a thank you, amen, rock and roll, om saram if you're from India. Just set your intent. It's got to be your way. It's like Burger King, have it your way. And let Charlotte show you who they are, or at least put some words to it so that you relate. And then you can have them come in and they'll show you some light at least on your eyelids, or you can hear a collective voice of love. And you can keep a lot of this private, but if you could get a takeaway from both that other loving being group and Charlotte at the end, that would be the bare minimum. If you could give us some sort of a pass along uplifting message for our daily path.
Yeah, as far as like more of a trance state, and again, working with plant medicines now has expanded my role and my consciousness and my relationship. And what I see from that and what I hear from that is the role of community. And the word community within itself has the word unity. And that we are, regardless of species, regardless of how we look, even on our own planet, we're all part of a bigger community, a collection of, whether it's inspirers, some may call it the Akashic records, some may call it the teachers, the gurus, the guides, the spiritual entourage, the angels. At the collective source, it's like this big collective, and in the center of it is a fire, and we all have a seat at the fire if we choose to, but many of us choose not to. And that's that acceptance and that free will, that if we move into something bigger than ourselves, again, that finger touching the finger of God, whatever God is, there's always a seat at the council. There's always a seat at this fire if you choose to, which incorporates healing, knowledge, wisdom, transformations, understanding, empathy, forgiveness, compassion, kindness, all the things that we don't see right now on our planet. This is why I believe that this is unfolding for us to be welcomed, to be invited, and be part of a bigger galactic community, bigger collective within the universe, not just on the planet. Think bigger, think broader, don't think so small, and you'll be welcomed in, because in the end, we're all the same. Everything is energy, regardless of your species or what you look like. In the end, everything is energy, frequency, and vibration, because that is the dimensional construct of which we operate in a incarnate physical form. But no fear at all. Quite the opposite. Welcoming community, and within that, unity.
And I'm going to take a couple more interactive steps. We'll start to have you close it out after that. Here's a selenite wand or point, whatever it's supposed to be called. But if you would allow all the selenite consciousness on the planet to come in, and you can hear a voice if you want. You can at least get sound bowls physically in the room around you. We've had like at least 30 people since last summer get that. But if you can allow a lot of white light to come in and get another message coming in spontaneously from this direction.
Yeah.
And you could put your hand out and feel what you want to feel, unless you're already feeling it with all of you.
Yeah, I've got it. Well, I got the sound bowls and all the energy around me.
God. All right. Awesome.
Doesn't take me much to get to that point, but the thing that
and you were 2020 Psychic of the Year. I forgot the organization, but I should have totally mentioned that at the beginning. Otherwise, I wouldn't be like pegging you with all this, but you're very open, very intuitive. So
Yeah, 2020 Psychic of the Year through Best American Psychics, and then actually 2026, I got a awesome accolades award this year. So yeah, very humbled and honored with that recognition. But the message I heard based on that wand is really the reminder that we need to be present. That we as humans are getting very distracted through our technology, through our social media, through our news. We're not coming back to self. And there's this old adage that I love to remind my followers and my fans and my students and my clients. Yesterday's history, tomorrow's the great mystery. Today is the gift. That is why we call it the present. Eckhart Tolle teaches about the present moment. A lot of the gurus talk about the present moment. Why are we called human beings? Because we're doing a really crappy job of being. We're actually more focused on what was or what's to come and not being in that present moment. So when you showed me that wand, it was like the wand pointing to be in the present moment because that's where your true power resides. And planting seeds for the future you want happens right now because the future is not guaranteed to anybody. And so being a human being, practice doing better, but don't get addicted to the human being experience because this is all temporary, y'all. This is all temporary. So
We're getting close to, as a show host, you know how to close out a show. We're getting
yeah.
close to that. I'm going to read a little statement I love to read the most on the show. But before we do that, a Texas two-step. I'm in Texas. I'm an East Coaster originally, but I'll claim Texas as my home. It's pretty wild here. I'm going to put my hand up. You can either use all of you, you can put your hand up. Just get a little energetic connection. Let us know what you're feeling. Is it a little bit of warmth, sparkle? What words do you want to put to the baseline? And then we'll do one more thing. I'm going to whoosh light, but what are you getting first before I start whooshing and blowing through the microphone?
Yeah, just there's a lot of people holding on so tight. Just let go. Hold on and get dragged or let go and be free. The choice is always yours. So
Okay,
I invite this open, let go.
I'm going to blow you a little bit of light. We're going to blame angels, don't blame Canada. Here it comes. Did you feel a little extra?
You did. I felt a lot of energy. I was gonna say a breath mint. You might need a breath mint, but I'm kidding. I'm kidding. No, I just again, we're moving past borders of technology. We're in the Zoom room, but we can actually expand our consciousness and feel regardless of barriers, energy, frequency, vibration, atoms. Feeling that the sage, feeling that warm uh, energy of compassion and desire to be in service to help others, like what you do. This is your role. We need more people like you to be in the service of helping, of guiding, of not necessarily healing. I believe that we can heal from with ourselves, but there are certain people that can help other people lead to healing modalities. So keep doing what you're doing and rejuvenate yourself as well. You give so much of yourself, Michael. Make sure to rejuvenate yourself and take some time to disconnect so you can make that time to also reconnect, is what I'm
Yeah,
hearing.
they've got me going in the pool daily. Today was day one I got up to my
Going,
neck. Yep. And I'm looking at all the light moving around. They've got well, it was 3 summers, but last summer got whacked for a couple months for a different reason. Running and then laying out in the sun for 20 minutes. I know that doesn't sound like, how could that be whatever, but it's self-love. Okay, here's your little 5 sentence, just gentlest thing in the world. A collective of angels talking is the voice here. And I want to get your reaction to it briefly, but then we'll have you close out the show. Let this take you where it will. Sometimes the person next to you or a stranger just needs validation via love and compassion. A smile changes any moment, so too does laughter or a few kind words. Be compassion to all, do it.
it really just ties into my tagline that I say on all my shows. How I close my show: be kind, caring, compassionate, and dare to dream, dare to explore, dare to live, and discover the diamond within, and the many hidden gems that are all around us. Pay it forward. Kindness doesn't cost you anything. You don't know if somebody's having a bad day. A smile can go a long way. And I love that you're getting in the pool and rejuvenating through the sun, because a lot of times we forget that our greatest commodity why we're here is our time and our health, not money. But yet we kill ourselves to make money to buy stuff we can't take with us. And at the end, your health is your true wealth. And I learned that from my last 3 years of transformation with my own journey of medical transformations and severe, changes within my body. But your health is your wealth, and you don't know how much time you have left. That's the one commodity. It's one bank account. You don't know what that balance is. And I remind people all the time, carpe diem today, because that's all you're guaranteed. most people don't know this, Michael, but do you know how many people around the world on average move into the spirit world, go over the Rainbow Bridge without war or pandemic? And I learned this from my previous shows of doing, radio. 250,000 souls a day do not open their eyes for the next journey of tomorrow. Oof. Around the globe. There's 8 billion people on the planet. 250,000 of those people or souls on a given daily basis do not move on to that next day. And that's always kind of stayed with me from my own journey, is time is our greatest commodity, not money. So really focus on what you want to do with the time that you have left and really seize the day, carpe diem, because that's what's most important, not the almighty dollar. Again, which is made from trees, it's turned into paper, kind of a false narrative, to be honest with you. But we all have to have it. We're the only species that pays to live here. We're the only species that measures our life by time. We're the only species that measures our life by fear, drama, and worry. Move past that and you'll explore a higher consciousness of your higher self and who you really are.
Marc Lainhart, I'll try to make you laugh. You said carpe diem. I love fish. I love carp. You're amazing as an expert. I'm glad you came on the show, and look forward to having you back. Thank you so much for being on.
Thank you, my brother. Good to see you.